Do you have a favorite story? Maybe it's a novel or a TV series that you like. A story that you really identify with. One that I revisit about every 3 years is a novel by Barbara Kingsolver. Anybody ever read Barbara? It's one of her earlier works, and the one that kind of made her name. And it's got a strange name. It's a great name. I could see why people would pick it up. It's called Poisonwood Bible. Now, come on, if you're a preacher, you got to pick that one up, right? I think the reason I really picked it up, though, was because it was about a pastor, a missionary, in fact, and his wife and his kids, 4 daughters he had. Rachel is the oldest, then twins, Leah and Ada, and then there's the baby, Ruthie Mae. Now, I'm not really a middle kid, but for some reason, Ada, one of the middle twins there, is the one that I always connect to in this story. Ada, you see, was one of those middle children who had a hard time finding something special about herself. Rachel was the oldest and the prettiest, and she was self-centered and confident and obsessed with her looks, and people immediately were drawn to her confidence and her beauty. And Ruthie Mae, well, she was the youngest. Need I say any more? They always get attention. And then there were the twins. Leah had her dad, the missionary. She was a bit of a tomboy, and maybe Dad favored her for that, but she also swallowed Dad's Baptist theology, hook, line, and sinker. And so Dad was definitely hooked on her. And that left poor little Ada. And at a young age, Ada was stricken by a disease called hemiplegia. Am I saying that right? Maybe. That's how it's spelled. You can correct me afterwards, maybe, or Brad or whoever. And so anyway, it's a disease that paralyzes often. And so it struck one side of her body, and it left her partially paralyzed. And so Ada walked around with this little limp at first, but she noticed the more she limped, the more attention she got. And so this gave her something, to pinpoint, right? This gave her an identity. And so she found her identity in this limp. Look at me, she'd say, everybody. Rachel's pretty, Ruthie Mae's a cute baby, and Leah's a tomboy, but look at me. I got a limp, And that limp served her well. And the more she pronounced that limp, the more hardened and incomplete she got and felt in her soul, maybe partially because it wasn't all true. And by the way, she was always comparing herself to these sisters. I know we do this as children, but brothers and sisters. And so she would often wonder in her mind, if there was a terrible tragedy or a fire, who Mom would get out first. And she often imagined that nobody would get her, that she would be left. But when they went to the Congo, to Africa, to be missionaries, the girls were still children, and she experienced this strange sensation when she went to Africa. Many of the people in this little village had physical problems too, quite a few of them, and no doctors to fix them. And so there was somebody without any legs, a woman, and nobody even noticed her. She just went on her business. She crawled with her hands. She walked with them. She just went on. Nobody even noticed. All sorts of people like that. And nobody really gave them extra attention. In fact, a lot of the community didn't really notice Ada's limp. And she, sometimes when her parents weren't looking and her family weren't looking, she'd walk without one. Yeah. After, and when she came back to America, she went to med school. And guess what? She discovered that she really didn't have a limp at all. The disease had affected her, but not her legs. Now, isn't that interesting? Now, I'm not saying if you have a limp, you don't have a limp. I know you do. But I am suggesting something here. That sometimes we humans cling to our incompleteness. I don't know what reason, but we do sometimes. The scriptures tell us that sin clings tightly to us. If you read Hebrews 12, verse 1, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us. Sin, by the way, according to David Orendorff, I've got him over here, so you can rebut me here, Dave, is what happens to us when we miss the mark. It's that separateness, that division that happens when we fall short of who we are. And we feel, when that happens, this spiritually disconnected feeling. And the work of the church and the work of Christ is the work of reconciling, bringing people together again, connecting us all again. But what I am suggesting is that maybe it's not the sin that clings to us, but the other way around. Maybe it's we who cling to the sin, to that separateness, to that loneliness. Maybe we cling to it. All of us believe in freedom, right? I mean, gosh, we're United States of America, the land of the free. But our story, as Christians, our story starts not in the New Testament, but in the Hebrew Scriptures, in the Old Testament, the foundational story for us all, the one we're grafted into in Christ. And the basis of that whole story is all in the Old Testament is on the Exodus. And what is that story about? Freedom. The people of Israel were slaves. We, our ancestors, were slaves. And God, through Moses and Miriam and Aaron, led those people, our ancestors, out of slavery and into freedom. That is our foundational story. Now, we sometimes coin it as Christians in this language, from slavery to sin and death to freedom through Christ. But it's the same story. That's our heart story. Jews, Muslims, Christians, dare I say, it's the foundational story of humanity. And yet, in that story, if you pick it up and you read it in Exodus, what you will find is the Israelites, when they're out in the desert, they've been freed, and it's their first time when it gets tough out in the free world, and they're scrounging for food and water, and they're lost in the desert. What do they want to do? Run back home. They want to go back. Can you believe it? They want to go back to Egypt. What? Why? They don't run to Easter. They don't run to the promised land, but they run back to slavery. It doesn't matter how bad it is back there, you see. It's something we're familiar with. Here's the words. They're in the desert, and they're yelling at Moses. Did you bring us out into the desert to die because there's no graves in Egypt? Look what we've done by bringing us out of Egypt. Didn't we tell you in Egypt, leave us alone. Let us go on serving the Egyptians. It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. What is it about we humans that love what we have, no matter how bad it is, more than what we could become? Now, I think we hear this same voice, the same sarcasm, the same heart when we first encounter this man at the healing pool of Bethesda in our gospel story. I mean, just like Ada, he's paralyzed. He can't walk, and so he's right near the pool of healing. Hundreds of people, maybe thousands of people come here every day to sink their bodies into the pools so that their hearts, with all their hearts and hopes of being healed. And what does this man do? It's amazing. He's been there 38 years. And when asked by Jesus, do you want to be made well? What does he say? Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water's stirred up. But while I am coming, someone else steps down before me. You hear the excuses rolling, right? Man, that's me. That's me. Isn't that us so many times in our lives? The excuses we come up with, the victimhood we knight ourselves with. We get so used to being victims. It's such a great and legitimate excuse, isn't it? Someone hurt me. Someone's not listening to me. Someone's always one step ahead of me. So-and-so got a promotion and I didn't. My pastor friend came out of seminary with me and got appointed to the Yankton First United Methodist Church, 500 members, and I got put in Geddes, South Dakota, town's population of 303. That's my whiner. I got that one going. You see how easy it creeps in on us? You see how easy it is to embrace that, the victim role? I've heard it here at Bear Creek. Oh, well, this church was doomed before it started. They planted this church in the wrong spot, for crying out loud. Look where we are. It's a church row, man. There's a church every 3 blocks. How can we compete? They didn't give us enough direction. If we only had a better pastor. I hear that one often. No. It's hard to be a church in this non-believing environment of the Pacific Northwest. Let me tell you, every pastor I know says that one 66 times a week. You see how easy it is to play victim. But what I love about Jesus, we think he's kind of soft and easy, fragile. But man, today I beg to differ. When Lazarus, for instance, was lying in that tomb, wrapped in his own tomb of excuses, what does Jesus do? Lazarus, come out! That was not a whisper. It was a command. And when the paralyzed man started to wrap himself in all those excuses of life, what did Jesus do? Let him keep rapping and rapping until he was drowning in poor, pitiful me? No. Man, Jesus looked the paralyzed man in the eye and offered him freedom. Rise, take up your bed, walk. By the way, rise, that word, is really wake up. Wake up, Take up your bed and walk. There are those moments in our lives, folks, I bet you have them. Moments where you have a choice in your life, whether you're going to sit in those same pool of excuses and just live out your life, or you're going to rise and just do something different and turn and go another way. And this is one of them in the scriptures. Will shared a story with us in our Lenten study. Just, I think, one of the best stories. You got to write a book about this one, but I'm stealing it today, Will. And it's a story about when he was 16 years old. And Will, very talented guy, was in an orchestra. And who was it that was retiring? Was it the director? The founder of the orchestra was retiring. And so the orchestra came to him and asked him if he would compose a piece for this big event. Wow, what an honor, right? And so, Will, he's digging into it. He's enthusiastic. He goes crazy, And Will doesn't do a safe piece. You know him. It's going to be something, just out there. And so he puts this piece together, and he's excited about it. And he gets up there before the orchestra, and he starts working with the orchestra. And it just isn't coming together. Sometimes it seems like some of the orchestra isn't even playing the right notes. It's just not coming together, and it's frustrating to Will. He changes things. He works on it. He keeps at it, and he kind of he wants to scrap it, but they say, no, we're doing it. Let's go for it. And so the day of the big night of the big concert, there's Will all ready. And, his parents are saying, look, it's going to work out. They're just going to love it. It's just your self-doubt. Don't worry about it. And so he gets up there and he directs this piece. It is a dud. It just does not work. What a disaster. Can you imagine how that would feel? And of course, afterwards, there's some polite applause, and people come up to him and say the nice things that everybody says, even though you knew you blew it or it didn't work. And then he finds himself going in the back room, and there's a door there, and he's looking out the window, and he's thinking to himself, oh boy, I'd love to get out of here. Nobody would notice. I could just take off, and I don't have to go face all that group. I don't have to do it. And as he's doing that, a mentor of his, was it the director? Yeah, the director comes up to him and puts his hand on the shoulder, and he says, well, Will, what are you going to do? Are you going to run out the door, or are you going to come back in and be a part of us? That's kind of the question that Jesus is raising to all of us today. What are we going to do? We're going to sit there with that 38-year-old problem? We're going to turn it, run towards Jesus, run, rise, do everything we can. Let me ask you, which was easier for Will, to run out the door or to go back in? Resurrection is tougher, folks. New life is tougher. Facing that stuff, Will went in. And I'll have to say, I bet that move for you, I don't know if you could say it or not, but that has formed and shaped you in a wonderful way, made you a lot tougher. And you are tough, so that's the question today, do you want to be healed? Hard work, but we can do it. We can do it together. And one of the things that helped Will was that community. Even though they kept giving him platitudes about how it went, he knew that underneath all that were people who cared for him. He had a community around him. And we can be that community. And so that's my call for you this morning. Jesus says it. Rise! Take up your pallet and walk. And all the people said, amen.
After hearing that story again, I'm sure glad I have original music in the service after this. Would you stand up and sing with us? Let's sing. Walk with me, I will walk with you, and build the land that God has planned where love shines through. Let's sing that again. Walk with me, I will walk with you, and build the land that God has planned where love shines through. When Jesus saw a man in pain, he said, stand up and walk. Your life will change for good, and that's okay, just let it be. Walk with me, I will walk with you, and build the land